Okay, thanks very much. Just want to say a big thank you for inviting us. Feel very honoured to be here, actually. We're both very, very nervous, so we're going to get straight into it.
I think so, yeah.
One of the things about being designers is they never teach you how to be public speakers, and we've never presented to an audience this big, so it's quite humbling to be here. Just a little bit about us, as we're 10 years old next week, in fact. We're a very small graphic design agency based in London, and we, like most designers, get bored extremely quickly. We have a very low tolerance threshold for boredom, so we like to keep ourselves really, really busy. And the way to do that is to have lots and lots of projects, and we're constantly juggling between projects in the studio, and we love that idea of keeping our brains ticking over. So it's a slightly odd title, the one we called it. So I thought to explain that, and this is coming back to a very simplistic version of David's diagram that he showed earlier on. This is very non-scientific, I have to say. And the way we approach our work really is just if we can enjoy and amuse ourselves and entertain our own minds, tickle our own minds effectively when we're doing our own work, hopefully that will come across in the minds of the people that we're trying to get the message across to. And I think that's a theme that's kind of been picked up quite a lot today. The joy of actually doing this work is a real privilege. We're always slightly amazed that people actually pay us for doing this in the first place. But there you go.
Yeah, what we'd like to do is just take you through 19 projects. So we're going to have to whip through them quite quickly. That hopefully sort of exercise people's minds. I'm more nervous than him, I'd like to point out.
Can't be possible.
So the first project, we've done it so we can count down, so we know if we're running out of time, we can speed up. This is, it's quite a sort of big range of projects that we're showing today, but we thought hopefully it would just take you through the sort of way that we work on things. This was a very sort of unpromising project in some ways when we first started. We were asked to do a temporary hoarding for a shop at the bottom of Piccadilly Lights, which one of our clients owns, and it's the shop that's now opened as Barclays. And they asked us to put a hoarding up for just sort of 4 weeks while they did some building work. So Piccadilly Lights right in the centre of London. It's this incredible sort of beacon really of all this sort of advertising. We thought perhaps we could turn this into something a bit more interesting. Oops. So we built an enormous light switch over the site, and the brief was about telling people that Land Securities owned this. So we did that small over there and did this enormous switch. One of the problems we had is you have to get planning permissions for these sorts of things from Westminster Council. So we put it up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Well, we didn't, somebody else did. Yeah.
Somebody else did, and they said all you need to do is turn up with ladders and wear fluorescent jackets, and then no one will ask you what you're doing. So this went up overnight, and then and stayed there for about sort of 6 to 8 weeks in the end because the building work got a bit delayed behind it. But created a really nice sort of talking point from something that started off as something sort of quite unpromising. We tried to get them to turn the lights off for when we installed it, and then we'd turn it on again and have a big sort of show. But they said it would cost about £3 million, so we didn't do that. But the thing we really liked about this was that once it went up, suddenly all these photographs started appearing on sort of Flickr and Facebook of tourists coming along and putting their fingers up and turning this switch on and off, which we thought was really nice. So it started appearing all over the place. Most people quite enjoyed it, apart from this man. But I don't know why he posted this picture up. It seems a bit strange, but anyway. So that's the first project.
The other thing we do like doing is we like working at different scales. This is a completely opposite end of the scale. We've been lucky enough to work on a series of stamps, which we're going to show you today. The first one was just a kind of one-off stamp, a bit of a strange one really, just to commemorate the end of the First World War. So we played around with lots of ideas at the beginning of this. It's quite a tough design challenge in some ways. Kept coming back to this idea of the poppy, which is obviously very iconic kind of image, but somewhat overused. So in our research, we kind of looked up lots of sort of battlefield pictures and ended up playing around with the observation that the stems of the poppy kind of looked like barbed wire, so we ended up fusing these two things together. And what's quite interesting, at a tiny little scale like this, we quite like the idea that some of these ideas are actually quite hidden, and you have to kind of decode them to sort of to remember them. And then this proved so popular that they asked us to do a whole series of these. So we kind of really racked our brains and came up with a whole different way of doing this. So using poppies as a kind of generic theme. And again, that photograph of the kind of soldiers going over the top was kind of almost hidden. It's very bizarre seeing it that big up there, I have to say. And we kind of carried on with this theme. We found an old photograph of a captain that had been killed in the First World War at the Imperial War Museum, and we kind of thought it looked a bit like paper. So we kind of montaged it with the paper-like folds of the poppy just to hide it in. But we really enjoy working at different extremes of the scale, just to kind of challenge ourselves, really.
This one is a project we did for the Natural History Museum. We were lucky enough to win the pitch to do their identity several years ago. And this was a project that came out from that, which was to redo all of their learning and education sort of packs that they gave out to schools, which in the past used to consist of clipboards with photocopied bits of paper, and therefore you'd get lots of extremely bored-looking children wandering around the museum. This is what they looked like previously, which weren't the most inspiring of things, I think. And the big thing that we noticed was that we went down and watched school parties wander around, is they'd fill all these things in on the clipboards, give them back to their teacher and go home, and not have anything to keep or sort of remember it by. So we came up with a very simple idea of doing the covers as masks, which you could tear off. You fill in the whole sort of booklet behind, give that back to your teacher, tear this off, and it had little facts and figures on the back about the galleries that you'd been through. So we thought this was quite an interesting sort of starting point. Then they told us we had to do 25 of these, all on different subjects. So it then became a bit of an exercise in finding different ways of using holes without them becoming too rude. Like so. For the children to muck about with. Dancing ostriches, which were quite nice.
It's worth saying these models are both of our children, cheap labour, but they were told specifically not to do anything rude in the photo shoot. So
this one demonstrates quite well the rudeness that's possible with holes. As does this one. But one of the nicest things about this really was going down there when we tested them out with the children. We worked with education consultants about the content and all that sort of stuff. Was the kids just wanted to tear these off and muck about with them, not really take any notice of the museum, if I'm honest. This one was really nice. Join the feeding frenzy. This one's called. Only works if you look in that direction. But
that's quite rude.
Yeah.